I've had my week of rest working on smaller videos after I got back from hospital. I'm a bit better now, so it's time to resume our current ongoing series, starting with early Windows gaming. Without any further ado, let's get on with it. Lemmings and, oh no, more Lemmings were sold as a single package for Windows, which seems fair from my point of view. Rather than charging for a full game, they were offered as 2-pack, which was more wallet friendly and did not double charge gamers for a title that they already knew very well. I assume that you know what these puzzling classics are, but if you don't, let me quickly try to explain. Lemmings and its successor are puzzle games where your goal in each level is to lead a group of anthropomorphic creatures, titular lemmings, to safety. And since between the start point and the exit there are usually numerous obstacles and hazards, it's your job to use limited number of available abilities that you can assign to them to do so. Levels are divided into 4 groups of different difficulties: Fun, Tricky, Taxing and Mayan. Those groups reflect number of obstacles, kinds of uses of available abilities, time limit and minimum amount of lemmings that need to be saved. The second game in the package, Oh No, More Lemmings, follows the identical gameplay formula, only adding 100 new puzzling challenges to beat. Upon its release, Lemmings became an instant hit, often being placed in the very best and top games list in various gaming mags and in hearts of players. It quickly received ports to other 8 and 16-bit systems, one of them being this Windows release, which technically was 32-bit, but you know, potato potato, tomato tomato, Batman man bad. And same as all the other ports, this gained critical acclaim and popularity too. I suppose Doom and then later on Skyrim were not the first games devs wanted to release on anything that could run it, regardless if they even should or not. Lode Runner Online: The Mad Monk's Revenge is the longest title game in this video, and also a sequel/remake of year prior's Lode Runner: The Legend Returns. It features the same selection of single-player stages with an addition of 30 new ones, and a completely new separate co-op multiplayer game mode with 150 new levels to beat. This mode expands on the basic gameplay formula by adding unique and not seen before hazards for both of you to beat. But what is this quote-unquote new Lode Runner game if you've never heard of it? Well, it's a perfect example of how all sequels should be made in an ideal world. It's an extension and expansion upon original idea, but not to the point of feeling like a completely different game. It features incomparably better sounds, music and graphics, and high-resolution SVGA display, so that all levels fit on a single screen. There's also more tools at your disposal than there were in original released in the 80s, so you have small and big bombs, a drill for harder surfaces like stone for instance, booby traps and others. It's basically the same game as first Lode Runner at heart, but modernized and expanded. Each level is a small platforming puzzle to solve. Your aim is to collect all the gold, and when you do, exit opens up somewhere on the level and you can go through it to the next one. You are, however, always chased by the baddies that try to catch you. When they do, you lose a life. You're not helpless though and can spawn pits on your left and right, and they can serve either as means of traversal between the platforms, meaning you can jump down through them, or as traps for the baddies that chase you. Pits seal themselves automatically after a few seconds, and mastering the use of them is a key to success. Lode Runner Online is surprisingly fun and engaging experience in single or multiplayer, despite how simple its underlying mechanics are and how old its gaming concept is. Believe it or not, but McKenzie Co is a game by American Laser Games known for such FMV hits as Mad Dog McCree or Crime Patrol. And it's entirely different kind of a game to those action-packed ROMs. It's not a bad one at all, just clearly targeting teenage girls. I'm not sure that the sentence containing words targeting teenage girls in such order should ever be in any YouTube video, but I'll take my chances. Anyway, designer's choice means that I'm not the best audience for it, but I can appreciate it for what it represents nonetheless. It's a first-person FMV adventure game where you play as a teenage girl based in and around fictional Madison High School. The ultimate goal of the game is to pass your final exams, graduate and have a boyfriend to go to prom with at the end of the year. But that's what the game's supposed to end with, and all you'll do up to that point would be your typical high school life stuff, like deciding what to wear, attending classes, talking to friends, studying, doing your homework, shopping for clothes, going to parties and on dates, and even working after school. Besides one of 2 available characters that you can play as, there's also 6 close friends that you get to make in the game, and 20 other interactive characters, 5 of them being teachers. The gameplay is composed out of video clips showing a particular situation, problem or occurrence, and you choose your response by picking between one of several available replies. Then the result of said choice is played out as another video clip. Rinse and repeat. There's also quite a few small minigames in McKenzie Co that serve as ways of solving many of the in-game problems, like school tests or ways to earn extra money for clothes. Some of them are variations of fun favorites like concentration, Tetris and picture puzzles. As FMV games go, despite the subject that's not really my cup of tea, McKenzie Co is excellent, with stellar cast that plays their parts well, and fun even if a bit linear gameplay loop. So if you ever wondered how it would feel to be a part of Beverly Hills 90210, that's how. When I was a kid I used to play Monopoly with my parents and sister, sometimes cousins, and many times with friends. Nah, just kidding, I had no friends, I had video games. And now, go figure out which one was true. Anyway, Monopoly was the board game to play, and if I'm to be honest, as much happened over the board as it did on it. So all the negotiations, arguments about who should trade what for what else or how much something is really worth is what took a lot of time. Not to mention that the person taking care of the bank had to be picked carefully before each game, as some were more honest than the others, and it was not unusual to find my cousin having couple extra grand more than anyone else, seemingly for no reason. It was fun. So, naturally, whenever a computer version of the game was released, I was interested and eager to try it out. And as Monopoly games on PC go, this one's excellent in multiplayer that up to 6 gamers can enjoy at once in hot seat or even over the internet. It brings the spirit of entrepreneur board game to life with ease and is the next best thing if you don't have Unlock Original available or when people you play with are in remote locations. So if you have someone you can play it with, it's a huge recommendation and you'll love it. But, and that's a huge but I'm afraid, CPU players are simply put dumb. It's very easy to dominate them and hardly any game lasts as long as you'd liked it to, and quickly deteriorates to a speedrun to the endgame as they can't really offer any serious opposition. To summarize, Monopoly on Windows is fun with people but also entirely skippable bore if you're alone. Beavis and Butthead in Virtual Stupidity is a point-and-click adventure game based on popular in the 90s MTV's animated TV series. And it's as stupid of the game as the TV show was. And you know what? Good, cause that's exactly what its fans wanted from the game. A TV show, but in an interactive format. Your main goal of the game is to get Beavis and Butthead to join Toad's gang, so that they could feel as cool as he is. And as point-and-click adventures go, this one's incredibly good, despite very polarizing duo at the forefront. It's easy to get into, stays faithful to the original material, and is a pleasure to solve and go through to the very end. And let's not forget that it's hilarious, all throughout. Most puzzles are inventory based, and while not all, but a huge chunk of them are solvable based on logic and reasoning, even if a bit distorted by a prism of characters you play as. Some are just completely illogical and only completable by trial and error. The game features some arcade minigames too, and while they're not as deep as the main game is, if word deep can even be used when talking about Beavis and Butthead, they're a nice change of pace and thematically fit into the TV series lore. The numerous video clips are also funny and made in the vein of TV show, so playing the game feels like being in the episode and also being able to influence the outcome of it. Even if, like most the other adventure games, this one's entirely linear. The cast from the show reprises their roles for the game, so Beavis and Butthead is entirely voiced and not only subtitled. To summarize, if you like the show or are adventure games aficionado, you'll love it. If you're allergic to the explosive duo though, avoid it at all costs. Oregon Trail 2 is an improved and expanded version of the original game. It roughly follows the same gameplay structure, simulating travel from Independence, Missouri to Willamette River and Valley in Oregon, with all the adventures, troubles and educational breaks that the original served. This time you don't have to preset start year and can pick any between 1840 and 1860, and also your character's background occupation, which will define his bonuses and passive skills. These in turn influence successes and failures at various activities you'll partake in during the travel, so someone with medical background would be better at healing himself and others, and someone with shooting skills would be more proficient at hunting. In short, it's Oregon Trail but on steroids, and probably the best version of the game to date. But for the 2 or 3 of you who've never heard of it, let me explain what the original was, as I've only mentioned the differences between the two here. The Oregon Trail is one of the very first roguelites. Yeah, I said it. And it is, if you think about it. On your journey to Oregon, you have to stock up on provisions so that they would last as long as possible, and then plan out your daily schedule to take your group's needs into consideration, so how much they should eat, when to rest, etc. You'll also hunt, cross rivers, and react to various happenings, good or bad, that will without a doubt sooner or later befall upon you. Oregon Trail is one of the most influential games in history of all gaming, and countless kids grew up with it, learning about stock management, hardships of colonial times, and infamous dice entry. Not many people realize, however, that in reality most of us saw either Oregon Trail Deluxe or Oregon Trail 2 growing up, rather than the first title, which compared to the other two is rather simplistic and poor in features. Oregon Trail 2 on Windows is easily the best version of the game, but if you've only access to the other one, give it a go, it's definitely fun too. PBA Bowling is first in a series of PBA licensed bowling games on PC, and while that sounds epic and all, the game's definitely not for everyone. You have to either be interested in the sport or like bowling or, and that's the last or I promise, have up to 3 others with you, want to compete with them on PC in something and have no other games to do so. That's your basic target audience for the game. And that's okay, cause I'm pretty sure the devs knew from day one that they were not making a game of all games to suit all tastes and entertain ages 3 to 300 or 100 or whichever age people lived to back then. Luckily, despite not doing it often or even literally having done it like a dozen times only in my entire life, I do like bowling and also playing bowling with friends, be it in real life or digitally. And PBA Bowling delivers on all fronts. It follows all rules of the game, presents itself in clear and easy to understand way, and takes use of Windows as well Windows-based system comfortably, with each little window serving a different purpose, one showing your bowler, other score, other pins and so on. And the bowler animation, while not having many frames to it, is pretty fun to watch in excitement awaiting that next strike. In the end, if you have at least a passing interest in bowling or bowling games, PBA Bowling definitely deserves a spot in your collection. But if you don't waste your time on it. Pitfall the Mayan Adventure is a side-scrolling platformer and a sequel to 1982's original Pitfall. This time you play as Harry Pitfall Jr. and you're not in search of a treasure, but your father who disappeared somewhere in the Mayan jungle. It doesn't mean that you skip and ignore all the treasures that you'll find on your quest, but only that they're not what you're there after. They're a nice bonus though. Anyway, the game is your typical simple platformer, spiritually based on original, serving similar pits, swinging ropes and dangers in form of snakes and other various creatures that the original did have. But 1995 was 12 years after the original game dropped, and the difference between the two is dramatic to say the least. The quality of graphics in this modern Pitfall is outstanding. It's super richly detailed, beautifully designed and butter smoothly animated. I'd say that it looks incredible even today. Same can be said about sound design, which is just fantastic. And all that is even more impressive if you keep in mind that Pitfall the Mayan Adventure was made with Windows 95 in mind, heavily using its DirectX libraries, which not only allowed for high quality graphics to be displayed fast and super smooth under Windows, which I must add before was not a given, but also for resizing of the game window on the fly, even as you were actively playing the game. Sure, the maximized window, and I don't mean full screen here, just maximized, would require a lot more horsepower to run than the default resolution did, but it was possible and that's what was important about it. The game is composed out of 13 levels covering Mayan jungle, waterfalls, deserted mines and such, and it's a pleasure to play and experience all the way through, even if a boomerang is your main means of defense against several in-game creatures, seemingly bent on killing you for no reason. What's worth pointing out though is that Pitfall is not overly difficult, so if you're at least semi-proficient at platformers, then most likely it's a game that you can complete in one sitting. The box cover for Pressure Drop says it's the most fun you'll have with Windows 95. It's a lie. The most fun Batman's having on his Windows 95, because yes, that's what's still powering his Batcave computers, apparently for security reasons, is showing everyone, even those who are not into it at all, his collection of pictures of rare birds. I know, you would have never taken him for a bore, but believe me, when he's not fighting crime or another bag of Cheetos, the man is incredibly dull. What? Oh, okay, sorry. I'll tell him now if it's so important. So, yeah, he asked me to tell you that I'm incredibly disrespectful for not mentioning his pictures of butterflies too, and that he's Batman. So I did, and we can get back to our game, Pressure Drop. While not being de facto the most fun you can have with Windows, Pressure Drop is actually pretty fun, even if not addictive whatsoever arcade puzzler for 1 or 2 players. It's easy to learn and get into, draws you instantly, and is fun to play around for 10-20 minutes and move on to something else. Cause while it's definitely not a bad game, its staying power is somewhat limited. The core gameplay is based upon sets of bricks falling from the top of the screen and you controlling the so-called chromagun at the bottom. It has 5 colored lenses attached to it and you have to shoot said chromagun at the bricks with appropriate color lens chosen, to change all the bricks in the set to the same color. When you do, they disappear. Between the falling bricks and your chromagun hangs the border bar. It signifies the bottom of the game field the bricks cannot pass, so by extension of that, time you have to remove them. Each time set of bricks hits it, it raises, thus lowering the amount of time you have to tackle each set. And each time you clear the set, it lowers a little, effectively giving you more of it. And that's pretty much it. Pressure Drop is fun in short bursts every once in a while, but I don't see myself spending hours on end playing it. Pro Pinball the Web is a special one. It's a pinball simulation with an emphasis on a simulation. It features only 1 table, and while in case of many other games it would have reduced its significance considerably, here it doesn't matter that much, cause the devs did not aim for the quantity, but realism and quality. So while it's just the web table here, it's incredibly realistic, accurate to the point of being difficult to distinguish from a real thing. Physics and gameplay wise that is. Because the ball moves and acts exactly the way you've seen it thousands of times on real machines in arcades. which also means that it's a bit more demanding pinball title than your usual PC outings. Especially that it doesn't feature any unrealistic or impossible to implement in real life tables features. So it feels mechanical, it feels even simple in design at times, but it also feels right. And that's not something you can say about many games in a genre. So mashing the paddles maniacally and hoping for the ball to hit something that will give you big points is pointless here. You actually have to play the table a lot, learn all the ins and outs of it to be able to enjoy it thoroughly. The fact that the graphics and sounds are stellar and well suited for it are just icing on this already sweet cake of a game. I'm not gonna lie, I really love my quote-unquote impossible tables that you find in modern FX pinball games and prefer them to the realistic ones because I find them more varied and better suited for Sunday pinball gamers such as myself, but if I was aiming for true-to-life experience, Pro Pinball the Web nails it. Or webs it, because why not? Rayman is a proof that PC could pull off platformers as good, if not better, than those found on consoles. In fact, when it comes to 2D ones, Rayman is probably the most technically and graphically sophisticated game for the time it released in. And at the time, the only other platform that got the port of it was the infamous short-lived Atari Jaguar. Infamous for not understanding math and how the bits work, at least for the purpose of their commercials. But quite fun, if a bit underappreciated otherwise system. Rayman follows a classic story of good versus evil, so Rayman versus Mr. Dark respectively, and it's an action platformer featuring an unusual hero. One that does not have arms or legs, but hands and feet despite that. Aside from standard running and jumping found in other platformers, Rayman can also hover for a short time using his hair as a propeller and throw his fists as an attack. They can be wound up too for more powerful, devastating punch. The game is composed out of 6 big worlds and they're a marvel and pleasure to witness and experience. All the graphics are excellent, colorful and expertly crafted to paint the picture of 6 unique and captivating locales throughout which you traverse, accompanied by a stellar sound design. It looks, sounds and plays like a AAA title, and it's easily the best of the best PC could do when it came to action platforming, and an incredibly fun and easy to pick up game that I believe everyone should try. Windows version, other than running in a modern operating system, is virtually identical to the DOS port. And if there are any real differences between them, I fail to recall them. Simply put, it's probably the best arcade game out of this whole video. Phantasmagoria is a FMV point-and-click dark horror adventure with omnipresent early QuickTime events. A very heavy emphasis is placed on the cutscenes and full-motion video bits to advance the story. The main character, Adrienne, is fully digitized and displayed on a background of the pre-rendered house inside which majority of the game takes place. It's an old mansion that she just moved into with her husband Donald, but shortly after moving in she starts experiencing horrifying nightmares and her husband begins to change, for the worse. So she must discover the secret of the mansion before the evil that's within it consumes her husband entirely. While Phantasmagoria is a classic adventure offering puzzle solving as most games in a genre do, their amount is heavily reduced as compared to other Sierra releases. Instead, focus is placed on a full motion action sequences. It doesn't change the fact that typically for Sierra's games your character actually can die in many situations, and she will more than you'd like. This time, however, given the story and the background, it's quite fitting, so I'm not complaining, it's just an observation. All in all, next to Under a Killing Moon we spoke about in an earlier DOS history video, Phantasmagoria is one of the better examples of well-implemented full-motion technology in games. After you escape pod crushers on a mysterious planet, you find yourself in a world other than what you're used to. It houses the titular Robot City, a city entirely built, run and inhabited by robots only. With a very limited human contact and human rules governing their behavior other than the free rules of robotics, they all have evolved in their own special and unpredictable to us way. Well, there was one person there too, but he was killed in mysterious circumstances, and for whatever the reason, you've ended up being a prime suspect of said murder. For the most part, Robot City plays like myth, but with an exception that there's far less puzzles and most information and plot progress comes from finding different robots and talking to them. So keeping an eye on details hidden within robust conversation trees and applying logic and reasoning to all you learn will be a key to finishing the game by proving your innocence, learning what's needed to save the city, and secret behind your true identity. Because of course that there's a secret. Interestingly enough, many of the quote-unquote quests in Robot City can be skipped and ignored, and you don't have to 100% game to see the ending. So while the main story is linear, all the side activities aren't and are not required for completion. Robot City is a title clearly made for adventure game fans. If you're not one, the entry barrier and unclear at times design may be disheartening, so better steer far from it. And since we're on a subject of games like myth, Shivers is another one of these. And another one that was made for hardcore slideshow adventure games fans. It's not set in space on an unknown planet or a mysterious island, but starts like a B-movie budget teenage slasher horror. And for the good part of the first hour or so it feels like it too. Soon enough, however, you'll realize that spending a night in a haunted mansion on a dare from your friends is more dangerous and deadly than you would have ever believed possible. The museum is bizarre to say the least, and as you go about it exploring its countless rooms, you'll gather various tidbits of information and details about arcane myths, legendary beings and creatures, ancient civilizations and occult stories. All that, along with diaries of people who previously disappeared or worked in the museum, will slowly start to puzzle form into a bigger picture, telling you the whole macabre story. As with most myth-like games, attention to detail and keen eye are required to gather everything that's crucial. An analytic approach to put it all together into a comprehensive and captivating story is a must. While graphically Shivers may feel at times kitsch, non-linear gameplay and unprecedented sense of gratification each time you solve a tiny piece of a larger puzzle is all here, and renders it as a true hidden gem that sadly only hardcore adventure games fans will appreciate. This one's gonna be a short one as there's not much to say really. Shanghai II Dragon's Eye is another one of those mahjong games. You're presented with series of various game boards in 12 different patterns of pre-set-up mahjong tiles, and you have to remove tiles in pairs in such a way that all would be taken off the board and screen cleared. I mean, you know it already, everyone played one of these at some point in their life, so there's nothing new here. The interesting difference, however, is the inclusion of the titular Dragon's Eye mode, which is a competitive two-player variant of the classic, in which one player has to remove the tiles and another is trying to place them in such a way that would make the former impossible. If you like those slower, relaxing games or are keen on seeing how it would play against someone, give it a go. It's as good as these go. SimFarm is SimCity's smaller cousin. Instead of building cities, however, you construct and then manage a farm. Difference may not seem too big in theory, but in practice is gigantic. Where SimCity is a very proactive game where there's always something to build, bulldoze, move or repair, in SimFarm, where you design and build your farm, before you're ready for expansion there's a long period of planning, planting and waiting. When you plant crops and have to wait for them to mature, before harvesting and eventual sale, there's not that much to do other than plan crop rotation and future expansions. So it's a slower, more reactive game. In a way, it's similar to idle games of today where you issue a series of commands and then wait much longer than the playing itself took for them all to be processed before issuing new ones. And to be honest, I'm not a big fan of that. It may be my undiagnosed ADHD or just that it feels boring, but just sitting there and watching stuff happen is not my definition of fun. Anyway, aside from crops, you can also partake in husbandry, raising cows or pigs among others, but if you ever played SimFarm before, you'll know very well that while it seemingly adds another layer of gameplay, having to fulfill animals' needs, it's not very profitable. All that said, while it's obvious that SimFarm could never overtake SimCity in popularity or depth, it's not a bad title to play once every few years or so. As in general, despite many small issues, it's pretty fun if you're patient. SimCity 2000 is a sequel to original SimCity and, as the title suggests, a city building simulation. It was also the very best version of SimCity until SimCity 4, which came out many years later. Some believe that it's the very best overall, but I suppose it's down to personal preferences. Anyway, it's a much improved title when compared to original, as it was hugely expanded and improved upon, both in terms of substance and presentation. The game is played from an isometric top-down perspective and features beautifully, extremely detailed pixel-perfect graphics, also very memorable and atmospheric even if only MIDI-based soundtrack. Gameplay-wise, SimCity 2000 was so expanded that it could be considered an entirely different game. Underground map was added for water pipes and subway lines, there was numerous new building types like prisons, schools, libraries, museums, marinas, hospitals and arcologies, which were sorta modern ecological near self-sustained cities within cities. You can now build highways, bus and train depots, railway tracks, seaports and airports. And there are 9 different spec'd and working power plants. Most of them have a lifespan and either need to be rebuilt when said lifespan ends, or you'll have to risk possible explosion, fire or meltdown. There's a lot of content in SimCity 2000 and because of that, it's one of those games that theoretically could be played near infinitely. One of the biggest changes to the original's formula, however, are the city ordinances, which allow for setting up of certain rules and laws, if you will, that your city will follow, and in turn they offer benefits to it. To summarize, SimCity allows you to build and expand your city from ground up, connect it to your neighbors and watch it grow to become the metropolis of its inhabitants' dreams. And you're responsible for everything: budget, planning, expansions, and even damage control in case of any of the possible disasters. Windows version is a perfect fit for SimCity's Windows-based design, and it's easily the best and most playable version of this outing in the series. It's a game that stole hundreds if not thousands of hours from my life, as even today, whenever I launch it for whatever the reason, be it a video or just because, I can't help myself and end up playing it for hours on end. But you know what? Not a single of those hours feels wasted. Simon the Sorcerer II, The Lion, the Wizard and the Wardrobe is Adventuresoft's second in popular line of parody point-and-click adventure games. You're Simon and you've been transported into a parallel universe of magic and monsters that you've visited in a previous game, all via magic wardrobe created by the first title's villain, Evil Sorcerer. Your quest, should you choose to accept it, not that you have any choice in the matter though, is all about finding fuel for the wardrobe, searching for it in a vast world consisting of parodies of popular fantasy novels and fairy tales. And it's a recurring theme in Simon the Sorcerer that it takes what's popular and well known and adds its own little fun twist to it. It was a pretty well received game when it released by both gamers and reviewers, and over its original lifespan before being resurrected on GOG years later, it sold over 600,000 copies. Which is nothing to scoff at if you keep in mind that it's a point-and-click adventure, a game in a genre that was slowly being pushed aside by other more action-packed genres like FPS and RTS from 1995 onward. That said, in 1995 it was still a valid and popular genre, and this Windows version is really good. It doesn't add anything meaningful to DOS original rather than allowing Windows users to enjoy it without the need of restarting their machines into DOS and having to configure sounds and graphics options, it just works. And that's what the most crucial change that early DirectX Windows gaming brought to the masses. You didn't have to reconfigure things most of the time and could just run a game and forget about it. It was not obviously the case with all games, and as we know now, something that's definitely not the case anymore, but back then it was the talking point. Anyway, Simon the Sorcerer II is in my opinion the best adventure game in this video and an excellent title that is beloved by many who grew up in the 90s. Another video, another set of amazing games. What do you think about them though? Sure, some are better, some are worse, but not a single one of them was bad. Not one stinker. What a video. Anyway, let me know what's your favorite and let's discuss it in the comments below. If you liked the video, hit those like and subscribe buttons below. If you didn't, well then there's thumbs down there too. But I suppose you wouldn't have persevered up to this point if you really didn't. Around 60% of you are not subscribed and there's currently no way of knowing if YouTube will decide to recommend you the next episode or not, other than subscribing and hitting that bell, that is. And when you hit that bell, whenever the new video is out, YouTube will actually send you a small and friendly notification about it, so you wouldn't miss it. If you'd like to support the channel, Patreon and YouTube memberships are a great way of doing so. They will help me release better content and also they get first dibs on all new videos before they're publicly accessible on YouTube. If you can't or don't want to do that though, likes and subscribes are great too. I would like to take a moment here and thank all the YouTube creators from whose videos short bits were taken to serve as a background to my commentary. They're amazing and stars among the retro community. You will find names of their channels at the top of the screen when their footage is running and also in the video description below. For me though, this is all, so have a good one and I'll see you next time. Peace.
You're my bestest friend.